Celluloid stories and simulated emotions. Yet still my heart swells. Episode 3 of the Mad About podcast. This is the place where we'll be discussing all things mental health, neurodiverse and creativity related. Every show starts with a piece of creative writing, and the haiku that you heard today was by Ali. And thanks so much for supporting us, Ali, with your lovely words. And for anybody else who'd like to get involved with creative writing on the show or anything else for that matter, we've got a Facebook page and you can find us by searching for the Mad About podcast. So if you don't know me already, my name is Sadie P.
And I'm Catty G. We both have lived experience of mental health issues and or neurodiverse conditions and are massive fans of art, music, theatre and all things creative, as well as nurturing our own creative practices.
We'll be interviewing a variety of creative practitioners on each show, and as well as talking to them about their creative projects, they'll also be opening up about their mental health and wellbeing practices, and we'll be looking a little bit deeper at where these things intersect.
Every week we'll be taking on a different topic. This week, we're...
Film! So welcome to episode 3. Of the Mad About podcast.
Yeah, welcome everyone.
We made it. We made it this far.
Yeah, Sadie, you only just made it. How have you been?
Oh God, yeah. I've been really unwell actually. I realised that I had coronavirus. The whole of the last podcast. I don't know if anybody noticed, but I had to edit out the coughs.
I don't think anyone would have been any the wiser. You were an absolute trooper.
Yeah, I was saying that my head was feeling a bit sort of funny and I wasn't feeling top form. We both weren't feeling top form actually.
Yeah.
Been a bit of a nightmare, yeah. So I had a week off last week, but I'm feeling a lot better.
That's good.
I feel like maybe I brought it on a little bit from like the lockdown episode. So I was saying, yeah, lockdown's been great for me.
You think that's how karma's working this time?
Yeah, maybe. Bit me in the ass. But yeah, I'm lucky that I'm not in a vulnerable category. And yeah, it's all okay. It's all good. But yeah, how are you feeling after your interview last week?
Yeah, fine. I think like you, I had the sort of slight vulnerability hangover, but you know, I think in day-to-day life, I'm generally quite open with people. So it's nothing that I wouldn't have told people that I knew.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, it was good in a way. It was quite empowering. And I've had, again, like a few people reach out and sort of share stories about, oh, that happened to me too. I was bullied as well. Or one girl reached out to me who I went to that school with and she was like, oh, I remember that teacher. She was awful kind of thing. You know, it's like it's created all these sort of weird connections of people connecting around that subject. So yeah, it's been interesting, certainly.
I really like that film that you sent around.
Yeah, pop culture. What is cinema for?
Who is it by?
That was the same guy as last week, Alain de Botton, our apparent guru.
He's a bit of a guru, isn't he? Yeah.
I mean, it's the school of life, and we're trying to learn how to sort of all live a bit better, aren't we? So it's no bad thing to include things from there. Very helpful with sort of teaching people ways to think about the world, I reckon.
Yeah, when you sent me that film and I started watching it, I kind of had this feeling of like, I don't know, it's like being a child, and the excitement of going to the cinema and the sound and the excitement of it. I kind of felt that when I was watching this video, and
from watching the YouTube link.
Just from watching this YouTube link, I started to kind of like feel so kind of inspired and in awe, like, you know, of the amazingness of cinema and
Of
film.
movies,
And I was like, wow, we're doing this podcast. I didn't realise that I felt so strongly about film. It's not what I do.
Yeah, right. Yeah. It has that really like cinematic music all the way through the back of it, which really, quite like rousing.
There's like a particular kind of orchestral, dramatic kind of music with cinema, and it inspires so much emotions in us. Yeah,
emotive.
It's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
So how did you feel when you were watching that short film? Did you feel as crazily like messy and gooey as I did?
No, I didn't feel messy and gooey when I was watching it. And I have a thing where I can tend to watch film in like quite an overly analytical way. And I think it's just because I've studied it quite a lot that I put on this, like, I kind of can't just sit back and just watch a movie as entertainment anymore. And there's always like a part of my brain that's like breaking down all the different techniques that they're using and where the camera is and what they're doing in the music. And it's good, but it is annoying if you just want to be entertained by it.
Has it kind of perhaps ruined the experience for you a little bit, kind of being a filmmaker and learning about making film?
Yeah, I definitely watch less films now that I've studied film than I did like while I was studying film or before, I think. It's weird.
Yeah, I guess I don't have that background in film theory. So, yeah, I normally just kind of enjoy it for the experience. And I guess there's like some films that seem like they are made for film critics. They are made for people who are breaking everything down, looking for clues everywhere about what that means. And for me, I'm just like a bit lost, and I have to then search on YouTube for like, what just happened
This movie explained.
Like one I watched on Netflix the other day by Charlie Kaufman.
Oh, which one was that?
A new one called I'm Thinking of Ending Things.
Yeah, how was that?
Well, it was just weird. That's the only way I can describe it. But I mean, when I first watched Charlie Kaufman, when I was like a teenager and a child as well, when I watched Being John Malkovich, I was absolutely blown away. Yeah. And Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, I was just absolutely captivated by it. And I guess I kind of at the time of watching those films, when I was so at such an influential age. Mm-hmm. I don't know, like when you're young and you don't really know much about the world, like a film is like an insight inside somebody else's mind. Mm-hmm. And it kind of felt like there are people out there who are really interesting, and I'm excited about and that was felt exciting because most people you meet are pretty boring. So the person who made this is interesting.
Yeah, right. It was an insight into a mind that was working in a completely wild and different way. Right?
Yeah, it was like, there aren't any rules here. I like it.
I remember his films being really like eye-opening for me as well. They just weren't, they're just not like anything else. They still aren't, really.
But I think maybe with the latest one, like perhaps it's
I have to watch that now.
Yeah, some bits are quite slow and some bits are just downright weird, and some bits are just chilling. But all the way through it, me and my friend were kind of like just talking all the time, go, what's going on now? Who's that? Why is that? And are they the same person? And it's just like, I don't know. If I don't know, I don't know either. Like, just watch the film. And then it's like one of those.
The amount of times I have to go online and like go to YouTube and just be like, somebody tell me what the hell that film was about. So I've got no idea.
Yeah, I was just kind of like going, is this a Fight Club situation? Is this a Fight Club thing where they're the same person?
Yeah,
I'm not going to ruin it for anyone, but
don't ruin it for me. I just rewatched Fight Club the other day, actually, having not watched it since it came out in 1999, can you believe?
Yeah, I guess that's like over 20 years ago now, 22 years ago.
Yeah, it was wild. But actually it stood up to the test of time really well, I thought. It's still like, it's actually way more political than I realised it was when I was younger. Maybe that kind of stuff went over my head, but it seems like it's basically a political manifesto, rewatching it now as an adult.
Wow.
It was good.
I think that's like one of the first films that I remember seeing that kind of portrayed a mental health problem, because it's kind of talking about a personality disorder where there's these two people who are the same person and neither one of them has any idea about the other one. And I mean, I don't know how realistic it portrays it. It certainly portrays it in a very entertaining way, which tends to happen with mental health and neurodiverse portrayal in film. Definitely it's portrayed in a way that's entertaining rather than realistic a lot of the time. But it was definitely like groundbreaking in cinema at the time. I don't remember any other films that was
dealing with that, like sort of a multiple personality or schizophrenic sort of area of, I don't know what he was supposed to have actually had.
Yeah, I think it's I think multiple personality disorder isn't a term that's used anymore. Maybe it was back then, but there's like quite a lot of different types of personality disorders. Yeah.
And I know that the man who wrote the book that Fight Club was based on, he wrote it based on traveling around America in the sort of early to mid 90s and interviewing young men. And just sort of seeing, what were the topics that came up? What were they thinking about? What were they concerned about? And the main character in Fight Club is a sort of hodgepodge of all of the men that he interviewed from all over America. And so he's got a sort of, an absent father, and he works in a boring job, and he feels like he has, he was sort of a conglomeration into one person of all of the issues that young American men were facing, apparently.
Wow, I didn't know that about the writer. Who is the writer?
Chuck Palahniuk. Palahniuk.
I don't think I ever knew that. Well, when I was doing some research for this podcast, I just started to remember all the films that I've watched that have just been really magical for me, and they've really kind of like. Also, I think I've used films as therapy.
Definitely.
Like, there's been so many times in my life where I've just kind of Googled feel-good films to watch when you're feeling sad, or films to inspire. And I kind of Google that and then kind of find out about films that are going to like give me that feeling that I want, that uplift. Since we've decided to do a podcast about film, and I started to then Google about films that I really liked when I was a child and growing up, and then started to look at who actually directed it or who actually wrote it, and I don't even know. Whereas like these things that can have like such a huge influence on us, we don't even know who wrote them, or directed them, unless you like specifically like find out and are interested in that.
Yeah. And arguably, like the films that we watch when we're young, before we know anything about directors and who's writing it and all of that stuff, they're the ones that have the biggest sort of impact on us in many ways, or at least we absorb them on a deeper level. I still could quote almost word for word some of the films I used to watch when I was a child. They're deep in my brain somewhere.
What's one of the favourite films that you watched when you were a child?
Oh, the films that I watched like again and again and again. I watched Fantasia a lot of times. That doesn't
I love that. It doesn't have any dialogue, does it?
No, but all of the music from that is in my brain, like in my brain forever. And Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, we watched a lot.
I really liked that. That was great.
yeah, it was.
I watched. What the films that I watched? I used to watch Grease quite a lot. And Dirty Dancing, I've watched quite a few times. I feel a little bit embarrassed about that.
I love that film. I can still watch. But it's interesting to reflect now as adults, like how, if all films have an ideology behind them, which I would argue they do, how even films that like, Dirty Dancing, the ideology can seem quite innocuous, like, girl falls in love with boy. It's like with rom-coms, isn't it? But actually, there's always there's so much information in Dirty Dancing of like what an ideal American family is, and that they go to country clubs and, and they have harmonious relationships.
It's very political, isn't it? Because I mean, the lead character, Patrick Swayze, Johnny, he he's like a a working class guy, like a less privileged guy, and he's kind of blamed for something that he didn't do, but the assumption was made that he did do it because he was like less privileged. So the assumption is that somebody who is poor, a less privileged background, is going to be stealing and kind of, you know, behaving badly and not being responsible, getting somebody pregnant and that kind of thing. And then it turned out to be the privileged guy. So that's a huge lesson. So it's not just grinding people's booties. It's much more than that.
There are serious life lessons in Dirty Dancing.
Serious. It's not just titillation. It's much more. It's much more than that. It's kind of so fun with the dancing and the music. I guess like a lot of films are like lessons and delivering moral stories, and in a way that's very easy for us to digest and even entertaining and fun. So
yeah, absolutely. Showing, not telling. Yeah, and they have a real power to like normalize in that way, like in their power to expose us to things different than what we know. Like, for instance, I know somebody who wrote their university thesis on the role that 24 played in, you know, the TV series 24.
I don't know actually.
The only thing you need to know about it for the purpose of this is that it has a black president in it, and my friend wrote his thesis on the role that 24 played in Barack Obama getting elected, because he argued that it opened up American people to the idea of a black president being, you know, competent and a really good president. And then, not that it was the only thing, but, you know, how film and TV can open us up to these ideas, or how in Modern Family there's a gay couple and you see their everyday life as a gay family with a child. And not long after that was sort of regularly on TV, then gay marriage was legalized in America, and people argue that one wouldn't have happened without people being exposed to, okay, this is what a gay family looks like, and it's just a normal family. But, you know.
So it's quite a responsibility in that respect then, to kind of be a programmer, or something, like somebody who decides what gets onto film.
Absolutely.
What are the topics that get discussed, and what gets portrayed as normal.
And what prejudices you're going to tackle with what you program on TV and so on. Yeah.
Such a powerful tool.
Yeah. Yeah. All under the guise of entertainment.
I really like the quote in that film that you shared about what film does, and it being something that edges us towards being slightly nicer people to live around.
You think it does that? I think it does.
Yeah, definitely. Watching a film, like you have this opportunity to kind of see the perspective of somebody who you might never meet, and their life might be completely different to you, and they live in another country, in another culture. And we've got that insight into these lives of other people and these new perspectives. So I think, yeah, definitely. Like, for example, back to Dirty Dancing, the film is about grinding your booty and sexy dancing.
Yeah.
Slipped in the back door, political underlying message. And that's subliminal. Like it's not overt. It's like it's like a sneaky message. There's a real art to it.
Yeah.
With subtlety.
Absolutely. And there's all sorts of sneaky messages that get in that, you know, aren't good for us or aren't good for our relationships, like in a lot of rom-coms or whatever. But then there's a lot of films that do sneak in more positive messages.
Yeah, definitely. It's good you brought up the rom-com issue. It's something that over my last couple of years of kind of learning more about consent and what that actually means is, and learning that actually in most rom-coms consent isn't practiced. No. And a lot of the time the way of wooing a woman revolves around kind of what would be legally considered sexual harassment.
Yeah.
You know, when someone says no, and then kind of like the whole kind of way of wooing or winning a woman is to do with like breaking down her boundaries,
being persistent.
Being persistent, not taking no for an answer.
Yeah.
And there isn't often any kind of like consent when it comes to kind of kissing or any kind of sexual interaction. It's normally more of like a pouncing kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
I think we get our lesson, a lot of our relationship lessons from films.
Yeah.
If we know it or not, I guess.
Yeah, I think that they, in many ways, the sort of women of our generation that grew up on like 90s era rom-coms, we probably all have some work to do in terms of undoing that like unhealthy conditioning, because they were such unhealthy narratives of generally women needing choosing or saving, or, you know, there was very, very little sort of female agency. The story was all about, you know, the success of the romance and whether or not she was going to be chosen by sometimes a not very nice man.
There's a word for what's it like? There's like a word in film theory about
The Bechdel test, are you talking about?
the Bechdel test. Yes.
Yeah, it's just a basic sort of rubric you can apply to any film. It was a test, I think, invented by feminists. And they're just 3 questions that you ask of any film that you're watching. And the first question is, are there 2 or more named women in the film? The second question is, do they talk to each other? And third question is, do they talk to each other about something other than a man? And depressingly still, only 58% of films apparently pass this test. And that's way more than, you know, in the last 10 years, way more films passed the test than they did in past years. So
that's more than I thought that you were going to say. I thought it would be less than that, actually.
But it's because I think now people are aware of it. And also films are proven to be more profitable if they pass that test. So directors are realising they better represent women a little bit better.
That's really good to hear. And I guess, like, I'm just guessing here that most directors are men. Is that
yes.
something that...
Most definitely.
So perhaps, like, the female perspective and the female story is still not 50% of what we're seeing in films as well. So there's a lot of work to do there.
Yeah. And there's also a Bechdel test for race, or some people call it the Duvernay Test, after Ava DuVernay. And it's the same set of questions, but you just apply it to people of colour. So are there 2 or more named people of colour who talk to each other about something other than white people? And I mean, so many films. I mean, I don't know the statistic on how many films pass that, because it's a much sort of newer test. It's not so studied, but so far fewer films must pass that test, I imagine.
It's interesting, isn't it? I guess, like, if we're so influenced by films, there's this huge opportunity there. Mm-hmm. But I guess if the protagonist is always a man, and whether or not he gets the woman, or it's a woman, and it's all about whether
always
or not
a white woman,
the man, or
very, very rarely people is a protagonist in a rom-com a black woman. I don't think I can think of one.
Also, I've been doing a little bit of research about neurodiversity in film, and particularly about the way that autistic people are portrayed in a film. And quite often, an autistic person is not the main protagonist of a film.
Yeah.
Or always kind of portrayed as this kind of savant, artistic genius or mathematical genius. And, like, that's their thing. And they're not really kind of portrayed as somebody who is like a person in their own right, who is entitled to kind of love and a relationship. They normally like function as like this kind of thing or person who inspires other people to behave in a better way.
A bit like an exotic object.
It was like a bit of a freak show. But I think that's all beginning to change as well in the past 5 years or so, from what I've been reading. There was an article that I was reading in the Guardian about some parents who went on an autistic film binge.
Oh,
They set up an autism film festival when they found out their child was autistic, to try and find out more about autism. But after doing like the massive binge of getting information, they found that a lot of the portrayals in the films didn't live up to the reality of what it's like for people.
Yeah, they were all quite extreme examples, weren't they?
Yeah, I guess like it's more entertaining to have the extreme examples, whereas kind of what would normally, it would probably be a little bit boring to kind of watch a woman on film who's just like struggling to get to work on time and then has to go to bed at the weekends because she's knackered. Like, that's not very entertaining to watch.
But it's what Alain de Botton argues that we need, is like a sort of a cinema of the normal. So we need films where people are struggling with normal things and nothing much happens, and because that's how we feel connected to other people, because we're like, oh, she struggles with that too, or
I guess it's not always about the fantastical and the most craziest kind of examples of humanity, like some normal films.
Well, I mean, I think in rom-coms, they've taken a bit of a twist. Have you noticed it in the last few years? They started being much more like couples arguing films. For me, if you've grown up with any conflict in your household, watching those films is a little bit triggering in a way, because you actually don't like to sit and watch a couple argue. But from the flip side, if you're a couple that is going through lots of conflicts, I suppose that would be an example of a film that would make you feel much more seen and, like you can empathise with the main characters much more than a movie that is portraying unrealistic and hurtful expectations of what romance can be.
That's probably a really good idea for a film, actually, which is just about kind of the arguments and the resolutions and getting through it, rather than about the getting the guy. Yeah. And then that happens and then they're married and boof, happily ever after.
And that's the end.
Yeah. so yeah, it'd be really good to have see more films like that. Is there an example?
There were quite a few films that were sort of sold themselves as a rom-com, but were actually much more sort of couples arguing. So
they can kind of like lure people in with the promise of like sexual harassment, but instead give them consent and like healthy boundaries.
Never. Oh yeah, The Breakup is a good example. That's sort of marketed as a rom-com, but I actually found that really stressful to watch. That was like Jennifer Aniston and Vince Vaughn.
Oh, I've not seen that one. I have to check it out.
I mean, obviously it sounds like it's going to be about a breakup, but it is definitely marketed as a rom-com. I wouldn't recommend it to watch it, because it is just a couple arguing.
Okay, noted, yeah.
And now it's time to pay a visit to our grumpy old friend, the Means Well Well.
The Means Well Well.
For those who haven't listened to any of our previous shows, the Means Well Well is our grumpy old pal who likes to eat unhelpful advice that has been received by our listeners.
And he takes the piece of advice and gives us an alternative that perhaps could have been more helpful.
And very importantly, the Means Well Well is tuned in to our individual contributors to what would have been more helpful for them in particular.
Yeah, because not every piece of advice is blanket works for everyone, is it?
Yeah, exactly. Something that works for one person might not work for the next person, so we need to be aware of that.
Yeah. And so who have we got on the phone today? Hello?
Hey.
Who's this, please?
It's Finn from Bristol.
Hi, Finn from Bristol. Have you got a piece of advice that you'd like to give to the well?
Yeah, find a distraction or keep busy.
Could you explain that a little bit more, please?
Well, I think what people mean is don't dwell on your issues, but I think sometimes it's more helpful to confront them and try and work out what's at the bottom of it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Okay, so we're just going to throw that piece of advice into the Means Well Well and see what it comes back up with. Do you mind holding on the line for a second?
Yeah, that's cool.
Okay, so Sadie, do you want to shout that piece of advice down into the well for Finn?
Certainly, it would be my pleasure. Okay. Distract yourselves. Just keep busy. I had the plunk.
Yeah, it's definitely hit the bottom.
Shall I bring the bucket up?
Yeah, get those muscles working, Sadie.
Okay. Oh god, it's really stiff.
Maybe the well's got a hefty advice for us today.
It's heavy, really heavy. I can see it. It's got loads of water in the bucket. That's why.
No wonder it's so heavy.
That's so
Well
heavy.
done, Sadie.
Okay, I've got it.
Good job.
I'm opening it out. It's a piece of paper here.
What does it say?
So the Means Well has got quite a long explanation here again. It's not quite as simple as having one different phrase. The Means Well says that sometimes distractions and keeping busy can work in the short term, but longer term, sitting with uncomfortable feelings and working through them might be more beneficial.
Yeah.
Yes. What do you think about that, Catty?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's quite like an important piece of advice, really, because as the well says, you can distract yourself in the short term, but actually, to actually solve problems, often the only way out is through rather than around or looking away.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, but also the time has to be right for going deeper into working out what the issues are, and perhaps sometimes there's a time and a place for distractions and keeping busy, but it's, I guess, a case of being aware that is what's happening and it's not a long-term fix.
Absolutely. Yeah, because if your brain is circling round and round on one thing and actually you're sort of stuck in unhealthy thought patterns, then actually sometimes the distraction can be exactly what you need, just to sort of change your thinking, change up everything.
Yeah, I think sometimes it can be the only thing that's needed, and yeah, like we said earlier, the Means Well is tuned into the individual needs. So yeah, for some people a distraction might be a perfectly valid way to manage mental health, and for some people it might kind of be counterproductive.
Exacerbate it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, good one.
So yeah, thank you, Means Well.
Yes, thank you.
Should we go back to our caller?
Yes.
Finn, are you there?
Hey.
Great. What do you think about that, Finn?
Yeah, that's much better. Thank you.
Thank you, Elle. And thank you, Finn.
Yes, thanks very much, Finn.
Okay, so now welcoming Alex Tabrizi to the Mad About podcast. Welcome, Alex.
Hello, Sadie. Good to see you.
Hello, nice to see you too. Thanks so much for agreeing to come on and let us ask you all about your life and your creative work.
Pleasure.
So Alex is a filmmaker and also a clown. Would you tell us a little bit more about your creative practice and the projects that you're working on right now?
Sure. So I always work on a lot. I usually have a lot of stuff going on at the same time. And that's because I suppose I meet a lot of people and I network quite often. So I'm always being sort of cajoled into working with other people, and I enjoy that actually. And projects that I've got on now, as I say, quite a few. There was a long-term project I was working on last year, which was a documentary, and that's probably about halfway through, maybe not quite halfway through. And the sort of clown world, I started working with a great clown and a great clown facilitator, Angela De Castro, last year. I did one of her workshops earlier. We stayed in touch and we met in Brixton, where she lives, once, and we talked about doing her Why Not Institute Festival. I think it's not Jackson Lane, And obviously the pandemic happened, all that work that we were going to do together fell through, but out of it came a nice friendship and a relationship and a working relationship. And we made several films together, and I hope that continues into the new year as well. And I'm sure it will. And yeah, some other things, I suppose I've got the daily grind, you know, the corporate sort of freelance work, the video. I did a nice project with a circus company who I love. They're size specific, so they journey to, it's usually a national trust place in the country, and they do lots of lovely aerial stuff and acrobatics, and they tell stories through the woods, and it's a family orientated event, and I suppose perfect for this kind of current climate we're in a way. But anyway, so yeah, we made a film together last year, and I hope to be working with them soon, and that's something else. And I guess I've just started to work for the Barn Theatre in Cirencester, and I was brought on the team and very quickly to do a feature film, and that was feels like 3 months ago, but it was actually 4 weeks ago. So not has happened.
Wow, you've got a lot going on.
Yeah.
And how did you get into filmmaking? I'm wondering if there was like a pivotal moment in your childhood where you realised that's what I want to do.
Yeah, I suppose like I was always enamoured with film, and film is somewhere where I could sort of escape life and immerse myself. And I was always creative. So I think it was about must have been like age 11 that I thought, you know, you watch the films that really have a big effect on your childhood. And for me, yeah, I suppose I loved to play. I did sort of lots of artsy, crafty stuff, and I wrote comic strips and did pictures and artwork and played music and stuff. So, I mean, I always loved film, but I never really got into it with education. I didn't go to uni to study film, and I didn't come out of uni having studied photography and do something else like an MA in film or anything like that. What I did do is I got a working job as a photographer, and in my downtime and at weekends, I had a girlfriend in London at the time, so that was a base for me. I'd go up and I'd do short courses, and I'd meet people and work on their films, and through that, and I was thinking about this the other day actually, like, because this is funny, like I met lots of people, and that was great. I got my foot in the door, and everybody's after a photographer to promote what they're doing on set. So it's easy to do BTS, behind the scenes stuff, and get work that way. And then I sort of transitioned career-wise into film, and clown became my thing that I did at weekends and on the side and after work.
I wondered if filmmaking has a therapeutic benefit for you, like either as a consumer or a maker. And I wondered if maybe you could tell us a little bit more about filmmaking and what that means to you in regards to your mental health, if that's okay.
Yes. Yeah, it's one of those things that you sort of, I think as a society, we lose sight of the actual function of things. You know, we take things for granted, but I guess any form of storytelling or even comedy or stand-up does something for you psychologically. And filmmaking's like that, and it could be that it gives you a little bit of a relief in some way, like maybe it's junk food, maybe it's, I don't know, like Towie or whatever, or Gogglebox, or Just some like rom-com, and that's not putting rom-coms down or entertainment down. I value and love entertainment. And then you have things that it's like a catharsis. It connects you with your inner life that is, something that's going on for you at that point, and you connect with the characters and you relate. And I think it serves all sorts of psychological functions, and it's, film is but one part of, I guess, our arts and culture that does that for us.
So this is a podcast about mental health, neurodiversity and creativity. And I wondered if you considered yourself to be somebody who has struggled with any of these issues at any points in your life, and if you'd be happy to talk about that.
Yeah, so I've struggled as far back as I remember, and I think after a while you have to sort of pull yourself out of it if you can. And that's not to say that it's easy or you can do it alone, but you have to sort of take the first step by yourself to initiate that process. And it can be a long process. And I guess it's a receding horizon. In some ways, it's never done. But I think you can alleviate a lot for yourself. And some people respond to that very quickly. And for others, and I feel like I'm one of these people, it takes a lot of time. And I've been I've definitely felt angry about that. So I go to a psychoanalyst a couple of times a week. He's brilliant. But I remember my sort of naivety when I first started to go into the room with him. And I thought, well, I'll be done in a few weeks. So, I'll pour my heart out and get it all out. And, he'll nod along and maybe give me some advice and some support, and that'll be it. But it wasn't like that. And that was 4 years ago.
Wow. So you've put in a lot of work to in therapy. Yeah.
And I think you go through stages, and there was a time where I couldn't do without it. It's always intense, but there was an extra layer of it being visceral and particularly a vulnerable time for me a couple of years ago. Since I've got to know my therapist, or know him as much as I can, a different relationship emerges, and it's very much an exploratory relationship. As much as it is you coming to the room and just giving someone the rundown of why you feel this stress this week, or what's been getting to you, or what you're struggling with, what's on your mind. So there are many more layers to it now. And I feel very grateful, because I know a lot of people, they never consider therapy, and I didn't for a long time. And maybe there's a stigma attached.
Yeah, I relate to that. And when I first started having therapy, I felt embarrassed to tell people, but I guess there's absolutely no reason for that. I think therapy is amazing. And thanks for sharing some of your story. Where are you at now in your mental health recovery journey? Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Have I recovered? I'm not sure I have. I'm functional. Where am I at? Well, I can talk about it. Like you were saying, there was a point you remembered where you wouldn't talk to anyone. You were embarrassed to mention it, and I feel that I've come through that, and I'm happy to talk about it. And I encourage people I know to take that route if I feel that they benefit from it, and they'd be open to it as well. And it's funny because I've done some work recently, and with some other creative people on a feature film, and A couple of my work colleagues there, who I grew close to over the couple of 3-4 weeks we were working on it, they're both in therapy, and it was sort of a nice moment to realize that about one another, each other.
Yeah, I imagine that kind of feels like a weight off your shoulders in a way, because like sometimes we can feel like we're the only ones, and we have to suffer in silence, and we have to hide that, especially perhaps in a professional environment. I imagine that could take the pressure off and just to enable you to function even better. So maybe we can talk now a little bit more about how we met. Because I remember meeting you in a co-created clowning group in Bristol, and I think one of the highlights that I remember with you was like putting like spaghetti in your hair or something. Or up your nose. I can't remember now.
That's also my memory.
Yeah, it's pretty special.
Yeah. Yeah, because we met through, there was a sort of a little group that came out of all the Holly Stoppit work, wasn't there? And there were familiar faces.
Yeah, it was cool. I met so many cool people through that. So when did you get into clowning, and what drew you to that art form?
I always admired comedic actors and character actors and sort of chameleon-like actors who disappear into the role and physically change. And I always enjoyed making people laugh. It was almost like my form of communication. I wasn't particularly socially well adapted, or I didn't have, it seemed anyway when I went to school, that I diverged from a lot of my contemporaries. So being a prat and flinging myself about and doing voices and impressions, that was, I guess, like my currency at school. And I enjoyed it. And because I grew up with, the comedians, the physical comedians and actors during the sort of 90s, and even the sort of classic British baddies, the camped up, Alan Rickman or Gary Oldman. It just looks so much fun to do. And I always loved doing characters. And it was only when I was searching around for workshops to do, and I started to do workshops in London. It was like 2016, that I found Holly Stoppit in Bristol. And I thought, it was a weekend course, and I thought, may as well splash out and see what it's about. And I don't know why I followed up and then began doing more courses with her, to be honest. It's strange, because I think to begin with it was like very much, why not? Let's just suck it and see. And then the second time, which was I did a 10-week course with her, I began to really enjoy it. And I think I don't see myself as an actor at all, but a performer and a clown. I think that fits me.
I think there is definitely a difference between clowning and acting. I guess it's what I really like about Holly's style of teaching is that she's a drama therapist, and she brings in a lot of therapeutic elements. And I've definitely found a lot of therapeutic benefit from clowning. I wondered if perhaps it's been a big part of your well-being journey.
Absolutely, yeah. I I think it's inevitable. I think anything that puts you in your own body, it helps you examine yourself in some way and gives you a sort of sandpit or play den to improvise and experiment with other people. I think that's always going to have a ripple effect into your life, as well as the benefits. There's the other side of that, which is that you leave with all of your neuroses amplified in some way. But equally, other times I've felt like a deep connection with people. Yeah, just deliberate play, putting aside time. There's like a Jungian term called the inferior function, which is, I guess, entertaining that side of yourself, your instinctual side, your sort of childlike curiosity, and putting aside deliberate time to do that. And I think that's really important in terms of recouping and also maintaining a playful aspect to yourself and life and being more creative. I think it's deceptive because we all do it. Like you think, well, I'm not being very productive today. I'm just sitting on my arse eating potato chips or watching the world go by. But
I totally agree with that. I think that at times when I've tried my hardest to be an adult and to do all the things that I should do, ironically, I've probably been less productive. I think we need that space and we need that time. It's equally as important as like paying the gas bill. So you were talking about kind of connecting with other people at work, and the fact that you really like working with other people and you get a lot out of that in your day-to-day job as a filmmaker. And I wondered if there were any other adaptations or management techniques that you have that enable you to be a freelancer with the kind of uncertainty of work and managing your time and all that kind of thing, and also to manage good mental health. Are there any tips or things that you do specifically that you'd like to share?
Like we just said, making time to do nothing, that's definitely important. Absolutely. And I think finding time to connect with mundane activities, the real substance of life.
Do you mean like washing up?
Could be, yeah. Or a simple meal, or a conversation with somebody.
Cool. So your freelance work is filmmaking, and you also do the clowning and the physical theatre stuff. Do you keep those two separate? So one's work and one is for fun, or is there an overlap?
There's all sorts of overlaps, and maybe there's a way to conjoin those two parts of my life. I think that is already begun because like we worked together, didn't we, last year? Yeah,
I was going to say the clown films that you do and the other clown film that you did with Angela De Castro.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
More of that would be great. I'm consciously steering it that way in my life. Who knows what will happen? But I'd absolutely love to do more clown films, and I'm certain it will happen as well.
Yeah, I'm certain it will too. I've got a couple more questions for you. How about this one? If you could travel back in time to give your younger self a piece of advice, what would it be? Your 15-year-old self.
15-year-old self?
Yeah.
God. Probably just not to be hard on yourself. It's the same advice I'd give myself now. Yeah, that's all I can. I was trying to think of something funny then, but it didn't come. Sorry.
Okay, also, since this is an episode about film, what is your favourite film of all time and why?
Oh, Sadie. Oh, God. Well, probably anything from Amblin films or pictures, or anything from Lucasfilm. So any of the Star Wars or Spielberg films that were just, stokes at any child's imagination. And I guess like these days, I've enjoyed journeying back through film history, and especially with, discovering old French films, French New Wave films, and European, Italian or Asian filmmakers. And like my dad's from Iran, so discovering films that were made in Iran, and like physical comedy, old silent films, and all the classics, and Jacques Tati and all that stuff too. So I don't really watch many films like these days, or like, but I don't really watch anything. I seldom watch films actually these days.
You're too busy editing. Whenever I hear from you, you're like editing till midnight or whatever.
Yeah.
Last question. Do you have a recommendation of like a book or a podcast or a course or a program, something that you've done or seen that's really helped you to work through something?
There's the work of John Vervaeke, and he's a tenured professor at the University of Toronto in Canada, and his YouTube channel is brilliant. There's a lot of, for me, like I was never really a sort of an academic person growing up, and so watching his channel, he's introduced me to a lot of things that I feel like I missed out on. And there's a lot of sense making and bringing together new ideas. He's like a cognitive scientist.
Oh, okay.
Works in the psychology department at the university. So he's really well read, as you would expect from a professor of his stature, and he brings a lot of ideas together, and he's at the cutting edge of lots of things as well. And for me, it's I've lapped it up. It's been great, and there's a lot of stuff that I would say would help you personally as well.
That sounds like something that I would totally be into. Can I check the name again? John
Vervaeke.
We can put a link to that YouTube channel on the Facebook page. Thanks so much for being open about talking about your struggles and your therapy and your creative practice.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be asked, to be honest. So yeah, thank you. An opportunity to talk about myself. So.
So much for listening to episode 3 of the Mad About podcast, where we talked about film. We got to know talented filmmaker and clown Alex Tabrizi, and of course we fed the memes well.
We'll be sharing links to everything we talked about to our Facebook page. Just search Mad About Podcast.
In our next episode, we are totally listening.